You read into all the good stuff that you're supposed to read in?
I don't have the script with me. I think I'll read something.
Of Mice and Men?
Now you're really loud. I'm gonna probably die.
Read into all the good stuff that you're supposed to read in?
I don't have the script with me. I think. How did you do that? Let me just turn it down there. Okay, let's close that out. Okay, welcome everyone to the DISEC meeting of January 31st. As required by Mass General Law 38, sections 18 through 25, and pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021 and Acts relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, signed into law on June 16, 2021, the Drive-In Site Utilization Committee will hold a public meeting at the date and time of January 31st at 4:30 p.m. In hearing or conference room A. The public is welcome to attend either in person or via the alternative public access provided. Jim, you're going to need to do all things by roll call and do a roll call for quorum.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's start with a roll call for quorum. David Reed,
Here.
Bud Nugent,
Here.
Susan Britta,
Here.
Rich Bilski,
Here.
Jim Saban. Jim Saban. All right, I'm here.
And Steve O'Neill is not present, indicated he'd not be able to attend today.
Yes, I knew I was missing somebody. I couldn't figure who. Okay, let's just get right into it. Eric, are you gonna run the bus, or is Kathy? How are we gonna do this?
Or I can share my screen. I can do it that way.
Yes, please.
Great, so you should be able to see this.
Yep.
So we had a couple of good meetings in January, and thought we'd recap, talk a little bit about our conversations with the police department. We also had a meeting with DMF and DEP just last week, and that was also a good discussion. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. Touch on some of the thinking about the restroom location, and then maybe close out with some thoughts on the boardwalk and the kayak launch itself. So, and this package really is substantially the same as what we sent out last week. We just added a couple slides today about some of the galvanizing treatments, which we can talk about a little bit later. So just to kind of refresh, this is where we started with the police, and we said, you know, early concepts had sort of this curving loop road coming out, the idea about a turning lane, you know, sort of as you approached 28, and that's kind of where we're picking up going forward. We talked with them a little bit about what's worked for them in the past as far as the events. And we said, you know, this is kind of where we're headed right now is a through lane in that's maybe 11 feet wide, a lane out, and then, you know, providing some space at the end for that left turn, you know, movement. We'll be bringing bicycles and pedestrians in on the left-hand side, the west side, if you will, with the goal of, you know, having greater walkability for the site than there is today. They expressed a real interest in wanting to have maybe that center lane go all the way down into the park. And they thought the value of that was, you know, in an event, they can run 2 lanes in. You've probably all experienced this. And then run, you know, essentially 2 lanes out when the event is over, and still have, you know, kind of this ability to get people in if they need to. So that concept of that approach kind of led us to a discussion of more than just a couple of spaces to allow for a left turn. We should probably look at making that lane go kind of all the way in.
It's cool.
So
We can have our own version of the Southeast Expressway right here in Yarmouth.
Well, I think that's one of the things Kathy really was pointing out and certainly expressing concern about was, you know, not wanting to carry 36 feet of pavement, you know, all the way across the entrance. And if there's a way to do it, there's either a textured pavement or a grass pave island that could be driven on when vehicles are coming in or leaving. But under normal conditions, it would look a little greener than it would if it was all asphalt.
So that would be a
this is
pervious, I'm sorry, Eric, that would be
Go
a
ahead.
pervious material in the middle?
Right, so we could do it as a grass pave, which is like a synthetic geotextile product that is like reinforced plastic cups. You've probably seen it, and the loam would be put level, and then that would be seeded with native seed. So it's got some durability there. Another option would be a modular, like a concrete unit that has space for grass to grow inside of the units. A third option would be a textured pavement through the center.
Hey, Eric, could you use a standard median there?
Yeah, you could like a cobblestone. Is that what you're saying, Rich?
Well, you use cobblestone, but I was thinking a standard median with curbing with grass through there. Just push things.
Right. It probably wouldn't be curbed just because the police said, their ideal would be to have that lane as far back as possible was sort of the way they described it.
Right. No, but I mean a median between the in and the out lanes. So in other words, if you ran that all the way through and then you narrowed it, so maybe it's only 6 feet wide, what you're showing is probably 12 feet wide. So, cut down its width by half, so it's 6 feet with plantings, and then push the left and right out lanes slightly further to the east.
But you understand the purpose of the center lane is to serve as a lane going in or going out during events.
Right.
So it needs to be the width of being able to be traveled. Are you talking about
The width of
mountable
a car,
curbing?
yeah.
No, what I'm saying is right now, you're proposing a median strip through there with a left turn pocket.
Yep,
What would happen if the median strip was reduced, so it's only 6 feet wide instead of 12? So it was narrower, and then you pushed the two out lanes to the east.
what's the benefit of that?
Well, then you get 2 lanes for stacking during events, is what the police are looking for.
For events, they're just looking for ways to get people out quickly. Looking at how events were run in the past, when you leave, you're
Right.
leaving, and you want to get as many people going out as possible.
Right, but it looked
As
much
well as
more.
going in.
Right, but it looked much more attractive if you had a curved median with plantings and bushes. Anything that we end up doing that is traversable is gonna be a weed patch. It's gonna be very unattractive over time. It won't be maintained well, it's just gonna be mowed. In essence, it's gonna look like the parking area is pervious. I'm trying to think of something somebody might know around here. You know where Bed Bath Beyond used to be, over next to Christmas Tree. It's just basically, it's pervious, but it's not the most attractive thing, in the world.
Well, I think there are considerations, like aesthetic considerations. You don't exactly know how that's going to look or be maintained over
Right,
time.
and it is the entryway to the facility, so I think it should have a lot of pop to it and look attractive.
Yeah, one of the ways to do this too, and we talked about this with the police, would be that I'll draw this, but if the lane sort of shifted to the west and this treatment became the eastern shoulder, and
Right.
it just was sort of part of the grassed landscape, to the east of the drive.
That makes sense, and then the
So then
median
in an
could have
event-
more- yeah,
Yeah, in an event, you'd be having people driving, on the grass, but it would be reinforced. It would have maybe cones along this
Right.
edge or something to
and with
define
that
it.
said, if that was the intention, I'd recommend extending the median out to 28.
Yeah, how
But
far back?
It
28.
would end up looking something like this because, we need to have cars that can fit in here.
No,
to
what I'm
turn
saying is,
left.
could you go to the previous drawing?
Sure, let me go back to this.
In other words, the median would go all the way through to where the left turn pocket is. And then you could push the right turn pocket to the east. And then you could use your turf blocks left of what you could do is a permanent pavement to the right of the lift station. And to the left of the lift station, use your turf blocks on the east side. So then you'd have your grass, the grass texture we're looking for. The police could utilize it, but you don't have that formalized pavement. Right, so it'd be paved from 28 to where the lift station is. And
Right,
the-
some kind of transition in here, right?
Well, right, and then from the left of the lift station, you could have the turf blocks, but then have the center median would extend all the way to 28 with plantings, signage, or whatever you wanted. You know, it look more inviting than having, 3 lanes right across
Yeah,
at the entrance, yeah.
right, it could be something, it's a little skinny, sorry for the drawing, I'm drawing with my mouse tonight, not a pencil, but anyway, you can see. You know, it could be a small median there maybe to just kind of do something with the gateway.
Oh, no, I'm saying extend, if you go back, extend the full median all the way to 28.
Yeah, to the north.
To the north.
He is. That's the median right
No,
there.
he's showing a partial one. He's there.
It looks like it's lined up with the entrance to the power, to the water
Right.
station.
So
Right, see it? He wants it pulled out all the way to 28.
So Eric, get rid of the left turn pocket, extend the median all the way through to the stop bar.
So take the green and move it all the way to the right.
Right,
But these are cars that are stacked up in a line to turn left.
Right.
Right.
He's suggesting bring that green barrier in the middle all the way out to 28.
Yeah.
Yeah, right to the stop line, the full width, Eric,
How
Yeah,
wide
but-
would you,
whatever the width he's proposing is.
that was
continue.
11-foot wide so that people could drive their car on it.
Well, no,
Correct,
then-
this is an 11 and this is an 11.
Right, so then what you would do, Eric, is the existing 11-foot lane you're proposing on the east side will go all the way through.
mhm.
Instead of it being a right turn arrow, that becomes a left turn arrow. You'll see in a minute. And then to the right of that, or east of that, where you currently have the, you see how you have a left turn pocket? Take the left turn pocket and pull it to the east. And that would be your right turn lane. Now you would have pavement from 28 to the lift station, and you would transition. And then everything to the left of the lift station would be the turf block along the east side. Because we're proposing a grass shoulder, it would be a usable grass shoulder though for events.
Yeah, I think the challenge with that is we feel that during non-event situations, but still when there's high traffic, people will be waiting to turn left where other people want to be able to feel free to leave if they're going east or right. So people will be less kind of inclined under normal circumstances to drive on the grass to make that right if that is the
Well, that's gonna be paved, that would be paved there.
He's saying the right turn lane paved.
That would be paved all the way to the lift
Yeah, it's
station
the
or
same-
beyond. In other words, Eric, you have to figure out your queue lengths under normal conditions, and that's how far the paving would extend back. Then
Sure.
beyond that point, where all the little dots are, that'd be your turf blocks, so only
Yeah.
during high volume events when the police are there.
Okay.
So you have the benefit of having the grass along the shoulders. But we have a really nice decorative median with shrubs and plantings or flowers, which we would not be able to have if we had turf blocks running down the center. So it makes it more inviting.
It's aesthetically much nicer.
Yeah,
The only concern is we're already squishing the space that's available for the pump station. And now we're going to be squishing it more by the width of the median.
It's only 11 feet. How much space do they need?
they don't need that much. It basically, it's depth. It's a massive vertical
Yeah,
pit.
so and we're
They need to get
horizontal.
up to a certain height and critical facilities want to be 3 feet above the base flood elevation. So they need a first floor elevation of like 14.
Yeah, what'll happen is usually it's on a concrete vertical stem.
So it's
And then
not
you build the structure
horizontal.
on top of it.
It doesn't bleed out
There's no
horizontally.
handicap accessibility to it, so you
So
need to
now
build-
lift station.
that's what they had before, was handicap accessibility.
No, for a lift station?
A pump station, yes, that's what they had before.
I'm surprised because most of the stuff is non-accessible. It's through
Right.
ladders and
I would
bulkhead
agree with
doors. And
you, but
I'm kind of surprised. And yet the
Who
biggest,
said they had to have a handicapped accessible lift station?
that's how they designed it previously in
Really?
2011. They had ramps going up from like 2.5 foot elevation change between the first floor and the grades with
Was it
handicap
always a
accessible
lift
ramps.
station or was that at one point an office building? or
No,
something?
it's always,
Always
always.
Do they have handicapped employees?
I don't know.
my understanding is if.
Doesn't matter.
It's a public, yeah, right.
It's not open to public.
It's not open to public.
Ba-
That's the whole
Basically,
point.
basically, that doesn't have to be handicapped because that's confined space entry. So you have to be certified, somebody in a wheelchair cannot go into that environment. That's a hazardous environment.
Yeah, let's double check that, because if we can pick up some space there, Kathy, that would be,
Yeah, because you need confined space entry permits to go in there, licenses, and I find that hard to believe.
and it's like restricted area.
It is.
Let's double check that.
The way we left it is because we are encroaching more and more on the space that was left for the pump station, in addition to the fact that there is a jurisdictional isolated wetland that has certain 35-foot offset of no disturbance and a 50-foot no build area.
Mhm.
So what we were planning on doing was proposing what we wanted to do and then provide that information to the pump station consultant, CDM, to see if they can fit it in. So, we could try it this way and see whether that would provide them with adequate space, understanding that we may have a problem later down the line with them having enough space and what elevations they need to get up to.
So we're
Kathy.
looking at 11
Kathy.
foot. Is that what you're thinking?
What's that?
11 feet. That's what we're looking. So
Yeah,
that-
we'd
well,
be doing like a 6-foot median curbed planted, which I agree would look nice. And then everything would kind of bump over. So we have 22 feet. So it's an
Right.
additional 6 feet more or less that we'd be pushing this way.
Yeah.
Kathy,
Would you move it down and, I'm sorry, Jim.
okay, thank you.
You are the chair.
We gotta figure out a way to get my attention here. That I can, and same with others, so that we can participate. I would suggest that we go back to whoever it is that's designing this pump station and say to them that we need to know now what your space requirements are. Because if we design this thing and then they come back and say, oh, by the way, we need more space, then we got to go back to the drawing board. So I think it's important that we get a commitment from them sooner rather than later as to what they need.
Because my experience with these, Jim, typically you need a parking space for one vehicle for whoever's gonna go in there for a maintenance technician, just to check
Right.
things out. Plus that longer drive would be in there for a boom truck with outriggers.
Yeah.
When you're doing maintenance work, when you're gonna pull pumps, or there'll be a pad mounted transformer. So the
You're gonna have a
biggest,
generator too.
yeah, the biggest thing with this thing is it's gonna be a big ugly facility.
Mhm.
So the biggest thing is, how do you hide this? thing?
Camouflages. Yeah.
Yeah,
Part of it is great.
But tell us what their requirements are for the site, how many, thousands of square feet or hundreds of square feet. We can at least then move forward with our design.
You need to look at the third dimension. I guess this is somewhat of a problem because they need to get up to a certain, they're not going to come off at that location. There's no way the grades are going to, they're going to be coming off much further south of our driveway in order to get the grades
Yeah.
back up. Because they are going to try to elevate it, I'm sure, as much as possible.
They're not, it's too close to 28. They're not gonna be able to mount that enough from my experience. What they'll end up doing is you'll do like a pedestal stem that'll stick out of the ground. The nicest thing to do, I've seen some nice ones, is use brick and other materials and you can make it look colonial.
Yes, yes.
You make it look like a fake building. But most of the building below with fake windows is gonna be this vertical stem that comes
Right.
up. It's gonna be above the floodplain.
You can do Cape Cod shingles in the white trim.
Right.
The pumping station.
But you
say
got-
the vertical stem above the floodplain's at 11. They're going to go they're going to be well below that with their actual.
Oh, there's gonna be a massive pit that maybe
Yes.
goes down 40, 50
Yeah,
feet.
yes.
But the main equipment floor where you're gonna have
Right, needs to be the
the
3
electrical
feet above.
contactors, because you have all kinds of three-phase, all kinds of electrical equipment. And then you have to have a big generator in there, because you got to have a backup generator. All
Right.
that has to be, typically, you're gonna be a minimum of 1, maybe 2 feet above flood if you want to take in the sea level rise. So depending on how high it goes, it's gonna be substantial.
So we've had an opportunity to discuss something that has nothing to do with us. But we do need to know the size that they need. But in the meantime, while we're having that discussion, I see Eric has been very diligent. Is this where you're looking at now, Rich, when you're talking about these redesigns? Is this where? is
yeah.
Eric-
The only thing is, Eric, on the far left, on the outline there, you wouldn't have that curve back up into the median. It would fall straight along the existing edge of pavement where you have it.
Yeah, I think at some point, the police, they will have to drop the median, and that could be okay, but in this scenario, you're gonna want to be able to get they want 2 lanes of traffic to be able to get into this site. So there need to be a gap kind of between the cul-de-sac area and the median, which could be fine. For if you had people coming in, they would need to, essentially need to cross over.
You want 2 lanes coming in?
Yeah, they do. They want the ability to have 2 lanes in for kind of most efficient flow, and ideally, the ability to kind of, if somebody's made a mistake or needs to leave, the ability to do a U-turn around this island and continue out, assuming this might be, closed off for the event.
Jim?
Go ahead, David.
Eric, can you go back to your first kind of graphics where you had the blue and the red arrows coming in and going out?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is
Isn't
where
there-
we started. Yeah.
Isn't there an advantage to the flexibility of that to allow us to have 2 lanes coming in as well as 2 lanes going out when we need them? Because I would think when you've got people arriving for an event, it's not quite the floodgate it is when they're leaving, but wouldn't it be advantageous to be able to have 2 lanes coming off 28 queuing up to the entrance to the plaza there, rather than just a single one? Because you might also have people coming in and going out of the kayaks at the same time, and the
Right.
boardwalk.
Right. Yeah, they
Doesn't
definitely-
keeping it kind of open with 3 lanes with sort of the zipper lane in the middle give a lot more flexibility than narrowing us down to just 2 lanes exiting and only 1 coming in?
Well, it could be run either way, but I think they need the most flexibility, as you point out, on the exit movement, because
Well, that's certainly the way it was when the drive-in was there, but
Yeah, at the same time, right.
there
So-
was only one thing going on when the drive-in was there. When we've got also kayaks and boardwalks and artist shanties and other things, might we want to keep it simple so that we have the flexibility to have 2 lanes coming in if we need them?
Right. Well, you could with Rich's idea. I think it ends up being a little bit of an odd initial movement, because you do want those 2 lanes in. I mean, I think it could be managed with the police detail, but you would basically be having, people coming in this way, and then on that event, you'd be also sending people in the second, or they may be coming from this part of the Cape. So you'd have the island would be sort of splitting 2-way in, and then what I'm saying is they have to reconvene at some point to get into the event parking. This works fine on an exit where you would be having, say folks here, maybe driving on the turf, and folks driving here to turn left. It sort of favors a more intuitive layout for exiting. On the entrance, it's a little atypical, but I think you could do it with a detail.
I think you could change, like Eric and I had talked about exactly what Rich had been talking about, is instead of having the grass pavers in the center, having them on the east side. So it would look like a regular driveway, and then you'd have a left-hand, right-hand turn near Route 28, and you obviously would have nice landscaping on either side of it. I don't disagree that an island would be nice, but I think it would really, from a functionality standpoint for an event, it would be really difficult going in. People would intuitively not want to go on the wrong side of that island. Even if you have people like waving you on, intuitively, they're going to feel like it's the wrong movement.
Yeah, I mean, that's the tricky thing, is you'd have to catch them. Let's just say people from the east are going to be sent in this way, with the island splitting them, and people from the west would be coming in on this side.
And here's the question too, Eric, are we gonna need a left turn pocket off 28?
No.
For what do you think about a regular use of the?
Well, that's what I'm wondering if we're gonna, well, before you say no, remember, it has to come into us for a permit. And we have to,
Yeah, our traffic engineers have been looking at it, and some of the guys in the transportation group, and they were on the call with the police. Again, the feeling was with the entering movement that it happened over a longer period of time, and it was a little
Agreed.
self-managed.
Staggered, yeah.
The presence of the crosswalks and sort of courtesy courtesy gaps,
Yeah.
you know, sort of people acknowledge that folks are trying to turn
Yeah.
left. There'd be message boards out here, there'd be people crossing the crosswalks. The courtesy gap allows for some ability for those lefts to turn and make that happen. On the exit is where they were a little more concerned with trying to be able to get everyone moving out.
Right.
So in order to move this along, I'm going to simply say that something that I say all the time, and that is people are dumb. Keep it simple. If we get too complicated, then we'll have somebody driving into the pump house station thinking that's 28. So however we design this, I would suggest that you keep it simple, and I yield to the expertise of our traffic people.
Oh, one other thing, Eric, just noticing here, the 5-foot grass strip next to the sub, you need to extend that all the way to Route 28.
Yeah, the goal was to get a little island in here where we could put the sign, but you're right, that would have to continue right out
Correct.
there.
I mean, you could shift it a little bit further to the west.
Yeah, what I started to say is we're kind of up against, we have a minimum vegetated buffer requirement here of 10 feet, and then the shared use path, and then the 5 feet. So there's some pretty linear math that we sort of can relay to Jim's point. We can relay that to the
Right.
folks working on this station, and that we are absolutely up against this edge.
Right.
Coupled with the grading and the barrier.
Right.
This is an absolute minimum on the shared use path as well. So, I mean, this is an interesting idea. I think it adds a lot to the aesthetic. I think it's just functionally, can you see it working, you know, on the in movement with folks coming in this side of the island, and in the other side of the island as well.
Yeah, because I think, Eric, you gotta realize the big consideration is 99.9% of the time, it's not gonna be used as a high capacity facility. So aesthetics is an important thing.
Yeah,
You know, so-
I don't disagree, and I mean, I think this is a nice, I really don't think we can do much of a median if it's curbed, even with a slope curb, and it's planted on much under 6 feet. Maybe we could say 5. It would really consist of just grasses and perennials. But it would do a
Yeah,
lot. I think no one wants to see a really wide throat of pavement there to this site.
I would say 6 feet is like a minimum width you should consider, because you allow to place signage so it won't get, hit by vehicles and trucks. And it's big enough that you won't end up with a death strip, it just won't die out. It's wide enough that something will be able to grow in it. I mean, obviously wider is better, but I would say that'd be the minimum from our experience.
Okay, so as a group, where is our thinking on this? You want us to kind of flesh out this raised median all the way through, run this math and see what this geometry looks like? Like I said, we would have to end it. We'd have to have some kind of opening down here at the southern end. That median would have to stop to allow folks to cross over, and enter the event.
Find out the requirements for the station.
They're not far enough along, I think, in the design. I think if it almost needs to go the other way, where we say, this is
Right.
the space that we're taking.
Taking.
Can you fit your station in there? Because we did try to do it the other way around, and Eric was going to take a quick look at it, but it just started getting so complicated.
Yeah.
It's really not in his scope to be
Yeah.
doing that.
Well, I would say
They
this is
haven't
what we're gonna
quite
do.
designed it
You
yet.
need to fit your station here. This is what you have to use for your
Right, but I
station.
think if we say we've done the bare minimum that we
Right,
can versus,
right.
oh, and now we've added another 6
Yeah.
or 7 feet, then they may find out that doesn't necessarily work for them. I honestly don't know. But that, we can certainly ask the ADA question, the handicap accessibility question.
Mhm.
All right, let me go around the room here so that we can move to the next part of this. David, do you have any additional comments? Are you content with what Rich is proposing? Are you happy with the original design that has been presented?
I don't want to make it overly complicated. I agree with your idea. The only other thing that occurs to me as you're sketching there is at the far left end, instead of a sort of a cul-de-sac there, what if you made that more of like a rotary? So that you could shift the lanes back and forth?
Yeah, you're right. This would have to be open with this
Right.
kind of concept, yes.
Okay,
But then what you're saying, a lot like the entrance to Seagull Beach.
Yeah,
where you got the
exactly.
Rotary type thing,
Yep.
or a roundabout.
so yeah, whatever the engineers design along there looks good to me. I like the idea of having some vegetation there, but I see that it complicates the intersection to have too much vegetation there in the middle. I kind of like to keep it simple, the KISS principle, right?
Yep.
But you guys are the engineers, so.
Well, I mean, we are ahead of the pump station. And there may be some geometric requirements we don't know about as far as, where the pipes are that this is tying to, that, maybe it has to be in a certain spot. So we could show this as most desired if the bifurcation of the in lanes is okay with the planted median, and show that with that group. Kathy, I don't know whether it's a meeting or we just send it along and coordinate with them that way.
CDM?
Yeah, and show them where we are. I mean, we know we need at least 33 feet right across there. And we'd like to see, I'm hearing a median is what folks are interested in.
I mean, we can send it along and see if they want to have a meeting, but they're going to need to have all of the background information with the isolated wetland and kind of
Yeah.
like to what we're looking at.
I'm liking
Right.
Kathy's idea of, let's just move forward and tell them this is what we're taking. You figure out what you got to do.
Just understand there might be some give and take because we do need a
Right.
pump station here.
This is true. We do need a pump station. Okay. Bud, do you have any questions, comments?
No, I like the idea of a flexible lane, one in, one out, one that changes based on the event.
So like that right there?
Yep,
Okay. Susan?
like the expressway.
Susan, you have anything else to add?
Actually, I'm in the Rich camp on this. I think we should pay a little more attention to the aesthetics. It's the gateway to the what we're spending a lot of time on. If we can make it better looking and still retain some functionality, I think we ought to at least explore it. I think it's worth it. Right now, it's relatively unattractive. It could be a lot more attractive and retain its functionality. So I think we ought to explore a redesign, a slight redesign.
So I think if you don't make the entrance inviting, I mean, we're gonna have a sewer lift station next to it,
Mhm.
and then you got the plaza over there. What makes you want to go into it?
Right.
I mean, I guess if we had to stick with this, the bare option, maybe you'd look at like cobblestones or something for that center strip.
But if we have an option, if we can make it look better and retain the
Yeah.
functionality, I think we at least explore it,
Yeah.
at least explore it.
See how.
I mean, I don't know how cobblestones play out with regard to impervious, because I think all of this was going to be either pervious grass, not even necessarily, I think pavers. It was more going to look like grass because it's the woven underneath the
Right.
ground and you really don't see it. Versus cobblestones. I don't know, Kelly, whether that would be considered. We'd have to do something with stormwater for that. Yeah. So I think maybe taking a look at it a couple ways. One of them is maybe just having a smaller island at the entrance and having the grass pavers on the east side, and then something that maybe is a little bit more elaborate and goes down a little bit further. I think something at the entrance would be nice. I certainly think having a safe haven for the pedestrians so they don't have to cross all 3 lanes at one time is always nice. I'm just a little hesitant to bringing it all the way down.
So we can move on with this. So I think what I'm hearing here is 2 things. The aesthetic for the presentation, if you will, of the entrance of the park, and functionality. So if we can find a way to make this an inviting, functional entrance, then that's what our goal is. Is that
Yes.
doable, Eric?
Yes, I think there is a way to do the cobblestones with grass between them. It just depends on the substrate that we put it on and then growing media. But I think we all agree we need 3 lanes. We all agree we need flexibility. And we really want to put an emphasis on the aesthetics. And the ped refuge is a good point too, Kathy. So we'll just take a look and see if there's a couple other iterations of this that we can offer you.
Okay. Just go to the next part.
Sure. So this was the conversation with the police and some of the other things that they were saying. And we're already considering this, but this is related to the pump station. We said there's really not a lot of lighting there. It's quite dark at night. The existing lights are sort of utility lights on the poles. So you can see on the south side of 28, there's no lighting there presently. So their feeling was they'd want to be lighting around the pump station and then on the entrance drive as well coming in.
Mm-hmm.
They also wanted the ability to put in a temporary message board, much like they'd done before. They wanted sort of a graded off area here. Again, to Kathy's point, these are the kind of things that sort of impact a little bit the footprint of the pump station. You're having enough room to put in a message board that can be seen. You know, I actually think it maybe would be up even a little further so it can be viewed in both directions. And all that suggested to us is that maybe the park entrance side needs to try to fit in here over on the west side in the form of some small island or something there in the shared use path.
Can I ask a question? Message board is temporary, correct, Eric?
Correct.
It would be. They'd bring it in for an event. This is just kind of a typical one. I think you have
Okay.
nicer ones. This is a
You don't have to worry about storing it or anything. It's not ours. Okay.
No, the
Correct.
town. I believe.
Correct. I think what they really wanted is to know that it wasn't sloped or tricky to get a truck up in there, and they wanted ease of deployment to be able to get it in place quickly and then be able to take it down and take it off site.
And what you're showing there, Eric, we would need an alteration or easement for the pedestrian facilities because they're outside the layout.
Isn't that what you guys have proposed now?
Yeah, so the current design, the shared use path sort of has to terminate and it sends the bicycles into a lane, to cross the bridge. And so, this work here would be part of the entrance. And I mean, all three of these things have to be fully coordinated. The 28 improvements, the pump station, particularly regarding grading, site distances, lighting, things like that, and grade transitions. Will be really important. So yeah, the bikes get routed out onto 28 and the pedestrians can continue walking on a sidewalk to cross the bridge.
Eric, what is that banana shaped thing right by your pen right there?
In the base, I believe there's a berm there today that's landscaped. So what you're seeing is kind of the ghost of that. If you want to sort of orient yourself, I think there's a wooden rail. Let's see, there's a wooden rail fence. I think that kind of kidney shaped guy is sort of in there.
Got it. I was like, what the heck is that? Okay.
Yeah. Ideally, it's all seamless and this whole thing has the same lighting and the same kind of landscape treatment to bring people in. I'd not celebrate this building as much as try to make it, blend in with other, large scale buildings, and marine environments and have the emphasis be sort of, from this edge in, and this is kind of a backdrop to the lighting and the landscaping.
Okay.
So we talked a little bit about the restroom location with the police as well. We just said, we're debating two locations. There are merits to either kind of this mid-park locations and there's merit to the south. We asked them if they had a preference. They really felt that, once it's off of 28, they have to drive in anyway to look at it. So they really didn't have a strong view one way or another. They did say if it was in this position, they wanted to be able to fit the 2 lanes of traffic in. So sort of between the corner where the property bends and wherever this facility is, their ideal was 2 lanes into the parking and the event space through there. And you can see this we put in the parking layout that's about 275 cars, I think is what's showing there right now.
Here, how are you going to address the one thing I do see is I see conflicts between the bike and ped and the parking facility. So if you have people walking in.
Yeah, so one of the things we've been working on this week, and it's not, I think actually I have a slide at the end I can show you, but one of the things we've been working on is trying to bring this through here and get the bikes to come in between the restroom and keep them closer to the road. So we're not, I think in an event you would close off and not let bikes
Right.
pass through there. Right. So to your point, we're working on this, and the impact of that is it sort of pushes the restroom back a little bit just in order to fit everything, in order to get the bikes through here. But I think we have a scenario that works.
Yeah, it looks good, 'cause that helps remove the conflict point. Or reduce it like the one location.
Yeah, let me just, I'll go a little bit out of sequence, but I believe we have this. Yeah, so you can see this hopefully at the back here.
Yeah, no, I see what you're showing there.
Yeah, so this is just, it's really in development, but I wanted to have it available today, so you can see it coming
Yeah.
out of the front here. So the impact of that is everything just kind of moves west, but we still got the 2 lanes. The ability to have 2 lanes in, I say 2 lanes, it's grassed, but the ability to run two sets of vehicles into the site, keep the restroom here, kind of line it up with the artist shanties, and still have the bikes come through across the front. Yeah, we think we can make that work well, actually. So just jump you back to where we were.
So while we're here, if I can, have a discussion about the location. And one of the things I shared with Kathy is why I still think this is the preferred location is if we think of this beyond just a bathroom facility, but think about it as a bathroom and a spot for coordination of the space, be it for storage of tickets or for, the cones that have to go on the street or whatever else, this bathroom can become more of a multi-purpose venue, building besides just bathrooms. And it can be built in a way that's very aesthetic. And I think if we put it here, it can serve more purposes than if we put it down at the end by the kayaks. And it preserves the views from sitting in the field looking at future events. So those are my discussion points about why I think we should have the bathrooms there versus the other location. And Eric, I think you've gone through some of that pros and cons. If you want to continue, I'll let you do that.
Sure, thank you. I will. Just kind of jumping off from what the police opinion was on it. And so these are some cross sections through that facility in that location. So you can see, to your point, you are elevated, you probably would have some views of the river as you go up and down the ramps or the stairs to it. It sort of works well to get the sanitary sewer tight tank in here. This is kind of the window for vehicles to come in and out, maybe some boulder outcroppings. So it is working in this location. And that's kind of, where we jumped off. I think the considerations are, the middle versus the south. It's about 500 feet. We'll have to fill in both cases to raise the grade. So it's kind of a wash. It's sort of a similar activity. I think there is an economy or an efficiency for the electric service to kind of centralize it and have it here. So I think, Jim, to kind of your point, it does organize some of the infrastructure. It does organize some of the planning in the park. Water, we're already bringing water down to the kayaks. So, that's maybe not much of a difference for the water service because it's still being extended down. The sanitary sewer, there's definitely some costs there that you would be avoiding by going with the middle. The pump might need to be a little bit larger if you went with the southern location. The force main length is longer and you would need more manholes or inspection ports. So those are costs that you wouldn't have if you were in the mid location. And, kind of looking at those numbers, it looked like more than, $30,000 of difference between the two. So that may sort of shade you towards if you're predisposed to the middle location. And I'm telling you, it can work there. That may help you make that final decision.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear that. Are you saying that the location you show there, closer to the entrance, would save about $30,000?
yeah, we'd have less, it would be less expensive, basically because you wouldn't be running a sewer line
Right.
and the manhole structures and so on.
Yeah.
That you would be running from the southern location. And it might be more than that. Prices are really volatile right now. But in that range of $30,000 to $50,000 on the not doing the sewer over that distance.
Is that your recommendation? You think that's the better location from a design perspective?
I think that when you take holistically, you look at the budget and everything else involved, I think it is a good decision to
Okay.
stay with it here. If you recall, it was here before, it just was on the eastern side. I think environmentally, it lets you do more restoration down here. It gets the structure away from the riverfront area. It saves some utility costs. And it acts as kind of an organizing central element. It's kind of a counterpoint to the stage. I think there's just a lot of functionality that goes along with it here. That I think holds up and makes sense in this location.
Eric, may I suggest, I see what you're saying, there are utility cost savings. Something you should maybe do is leverage the pump station also. They're gonna need a pad transformer for the pump station. So instead of, buying multiple facilities, we could probably tie into what they're gonna need for that and
Sure.
save substantial costs. And then, from some venues I've seen down in Florida and stuff, I'd suggest, usually you do a freestanding stainless steel utility cabinet for all your electrical controls. But, because you got the floodplain here and stuff, you might want to consider putting a electrical room that's accessible from the outside on the bathroom facility that would have all your control equipment for the venue. And that way it's above the flood elevation, or it's in the area that has the stop logs. So you don't have to worry about flood damage into your electrical controls instead of having, cabinet mounted systems that would get damaged in flood environments.
No, you're making good points. You're absolutely right. When I talked about sort of organizing the infrastructure, I think that's one of the things that this building here does well. Not know exactly what we're going to be putting into it, but knowing there's a need to protect equipment. It's a good central location to try to do that. Rather than you might have a pedestal in between and then another one down to the south.
Right, and by not having all those exterior facilities that just gonna get damaged, that we have one central location.
Correct.
Do you have a section where we're going to talk about the stage and the parking?
Not today.
Okay, we're going to talk about that next time.
What is,
Other than we could talk about the parking, I don't have anything more on the stage, but we do have the parking layout here.
Well, no, I didn't mean to digress, but just looking at this diagram, all the parking spaces do not face directly toward the stage. And if we're going to require performers to use that same sort of FM transmission and so on, that needs to be adjusted by 45 degrees.
well, that would not be, I'm assuming that's, you're talking about, Bud, that using the venue like we did for the drive-in where the cars had the speakers, et cetera.
Correct.
So we're kind of gone away from that with this concept. I think the idea is to have people sit on the lawn and park your car. I think that's one of the things that we talked about would, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kathy, but this is one of the ways that it will reduce the noise impact by having cars parked on the west side, and people would sit in the square area versus parking your cars
I
like we
think the
did.
sound was really the orientation of having it go that way in order to protect sound to budding neighbors on the west side. But I think the idea is exactly that. I mean, there's nothing particular going on where that parking is. It's still going to be grassed. It's just kind of showing you how a venue could be set up. And it's important because as you move along and you want to, where do you want your water for your, your vendors? Where do you want to make sure that you have some type of pedestal where, the temporary stage is going to go. So all of those things play into it. And it seemed to make more sense to have the venue further away from the neighbors, but also closer to the river.
So the
That will
yellow,
all be-
so the yellow lines that Eric just drew, that's to show that the roadway that would, I'm assuming that'd be a gravel, just kind of a dirt
Yeah,
breakout.
Well, I think we'll look at it, I mean, the ideal would be that you could ride a bicycle on it. It'd be
Okay.
attractive to families with younger children that might like a place to ride that's not as busy, as the rail
Mhm.
trail. I think the police and fire both expressed a need for like a defined way around this edge and back between the stage and the parking. And that path kind of gives that definition, or at least that's the
Mhm.
intent, is that the pathway would help organize the parking. And they also wanted to be able to circulate behind the stage as well, come around the back.
I apologize if I missed that part of the discussion at one of these meetings. And it's perfectly okay. I just want to understand. So basically you're saying in that open gray area, that's a bring your own chair, and that performers will use traditional speakers.
A line array system, I think, which is different than kind of some of the speakers that have been at concerts in the past. We're also going to be limiting the number of events that we have, including concerts that are going to be.
Okay.
Hey, Jim, I think a good way to think about the path that goes around is think of the paved like, bike path sidewalk they got around our Townhouse Park, where you get the playing fields.
Right.
So instead of playing fields, we have the parking, but the parking's still gonna be grass. The intent is it would either have some kind of, turf block together, they're like circular PVC pipes that are cut and hooked together to the mat. So it'd be basically a grass area, when it's not being used for parking, but has that ability to support vehicles.
So, thank you for that, Rich. Kathy or Eric, did the police say anything, or fire, or whoever you spoke with regards to lighting in that section? Are we gonna have to put lighting in there?
Well, that's a good question. I don't recall them talking about lighting in the temporary parking during an event.
We didn't specifically, but in other events, they have had some type of temporary lighting. I do think that we need to look at maybe putting some type of lighting in along the perimeter. But also being respectful of the fact that we don't want to have a lot of light pollution to the neighbors.
Yeah,
Right.
Eric, what I would suggest is if you look at the back top corner where it's a 90, where you have an area that's kind of like hatched out. Right up there in that corner there, outside of, right there. And there's another one where there's a 45-degree bend to the left of that.
Right.
Right, what you could do is think of more like Townhouse Park, where you have like a light tower, where everything's projecting away from the residences. It'd be a lot better. I don't like temporary lighting, because what happens is, my experience with temporary lighting, it's never set up correctly. It's spilling all over the place. At least this way, it could be done by a lighting designer. And then also, you don't have generators running all the time with the temp lighting, because when you're using like one of those crank up lighting units, this way it would be wired into the system.
We intend to do that.
Right,
That's part of the when they get to some of the more details.
Right.
And that green line there that is near his pencil, that's the road that we're gonna use as emergency access? Top right there.
Right, yeah, we did talk a little bit about this, and I think the feeling was that this could be narrowed down. It did not really want to be the width of Cortland. It wanted to be more like 12 or 14 feet wide. So, because it's just an access point
Right.
for emergency vehicles, this graphic is wrong. It needs to be narrowed down a little bit.
But that's where that would be.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Cool. Anybody else on that slide? Questions, comments? I see none. Keep going, Eric.
Sure. So we just had kind of closed out, and I don't know if you're done with your discussions on the restroom location. I think that there's evidence that the mid park location works well in some regards. It organizes things. It's a central point, and it probably saves some costs over the southern location.
I do think it would be great if the committee could make a decision on the location of the restroom this evening, so the designer can start moving forward.
I think
We'd
that'd
like
be
to go-
helpful.
Yeah, we'd like to go forward, in a more concrete direction, so we could get into some of the utility questions that you're talking about, like lighting and sewer and water design, but we really need to kind of land the building first to be able to do that.
All right, so let me go around the room here, or around the computer, or whatever we're going around. David, do you have any comments with regards to, I think we're trying to decide whether we want to put the restrooms up front or stick with the back idea.
I'm okay with it up front. As we talked about last time, there's some good reasons to put it in the other location, including to accommodate the people who we hope will be using the boardwalk. It makes quite a distance to go around that loop and then walk all the way back there. But if for other reasons this is a better location, I'm okay with it.
Okay. Bud?
Yeah, I like the mid location as well.
Okay. Susan,
Fine with it.
you're fine with
The mid location as presented.
The front location.
Yeah.
Rich?
Not opposed.
Not opposed. Okay. So there's a little help for you, Eric. We've given you some guidance that we think that the mid location is probably the preferential one. And again, I still think we have the opportunity to use that as more than just a bathroom facility. So I think it's probably the best thing to do. So
Agreed. I think
I was just saying, maybe the next thing is starting to look at, what type of size and how the layout of that might look, Eric, as well. You just want to make sure that you have enough size for some of the things we've been talking about, because the grades are so kind of critical there of getting up to it with handicap accessibility.
yes, yep. No, with this information, we'll be able to sort of marry that with the access requirements for parking and then match it up with the utilities and see what you end up with for a footprint.
So Eric, are we fairly confident we can build it as a mounted structure?
We get it permitted before the end of the year, yes.
Okay, great.
That's why we need to start making.
okay, that's the answer to that. Next, keep moving.
I should not have answered for Eric, but
Well-
that was our understanding from different conversations we've had with the building commissioner and DCR with regard to the change in the building code. The change in the building code might come as early as January 2023, where they're going to start looking at coastal A zones. I hope the Conservation Commission doesn't do anything with regard to coastal A zones before.
They are planning on it for the Springtown meeting.
So what are they planning on doing?
I don't have those specifics at the moment, but I can give them to you. I have a draft. I just can't remember it.
So have they had public hearings or public meetings about it?
Not yet. We're looking at putting it on our next agenda in February.
So maybe that's something that needs to be looked at more on the local level than.
So
than
it's
the state.
actually in the coastal A zone, is it? That
Oh,
building
yeah, the
is,
whole-
the whole one.
You know, Kelly, the fall town meeting is a wonderful town meeting too.
Well, I think lots of times what they do in regulations, and they certainly did it with the stormwater regulations, is if you're at a certain point in design, understanding that understanding that certain things are exempt from the new regulations if you've kind of gone to a certain point. So that might be a case of something here. But I mean, the state is looking at coastal A zones themselves in the building code, which has obviously much more teeth than a lot of other things. So they want to have that in before the state.
Yeah, I mean, we've been waiting for the state for a really long time.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. So maybe Kelly and I can stay coordinated with that, and maybe the DISAC could write a letter or something on those, commenting on those wetland regulations, saying we're kind of in the part way down through this. I'm assuming that this spot still is in the coastal A zone. I know the old spot was, but we can certainly take a look at that. Yeah, good question.
Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, one thing I would say is if for some reason the assumptions about how this is built in this location changes, you can see the sanitary sewer tight tank, there's advantages here. This part of the site's very low. So filling here for the restroom sort of works and provides, there's going to be buoyancy issues and design considerations with that tank.
Yeah, I agree.
Hey, Eric, if you back up one. This from my past experience with other projects of much greater size and scale. I just want to pass this idea along. If you had the entranceway up to where the cul-de-sac is in the bathhouse, is it worth exploring, looking at that? Is
that's the higher priority to push it. We are worried about certain drop dead dates for rule changes. Focus more on that part of design, and we could segment it as advanced work, because that's saved us on certain projects we've done.
We did talk about maybe needing to permit restrooms separately in order to make sure that we had a building permit in hand
Right.
before the end of the year. So that's certainly something that we've talked about. It's really if you have a building permit in hand. And sometimes they have like a 6-month kind of grace period where you could design something under the old or something under the new. You don't really know whether they're going to have that or not. Because if they had that, that would give us another 6 months of still being able to
Right.
use the old building. That's a problem with projects that go on and on. Rules and regulations change, like the Parker's River Bridge and
Mhm.
the guardrails and everything. And then you have to redesign it to go along.
All right, go ahead, Eric.
Okay, so we can move on maybe to the boardwalk. We can just touch on that
Yep.
a little bit in our conversation. Kelly was part of that meeting as well last week. And it was sort of to introduce the folks at DMF and DEP to the project. We did talk about the sort of upland component that we've been spending time on tonight, the Riverwalk Park. They're most interested in, of course, the boardwalk. We explained the approach, our ideas about, 1-to-1 on these yellow kind of north-south passages, and then on the red, trying to obtain a higher clearance there. They did ask us questions about grading and shading. I think overall they were pleased that we were trying to keep it higher and that we were beginning a discussion with them about maximizing the amount of sun that could come onto the structure. And that kind of is translated through this diagram. We shared with them these images talking about the clearance, below and the north-south. And then the clearance above, below again on the east-west side. I don't know why that says north-south, but this would be east-west on the higher clearance. And then we also shared these images with them, which you've seen, just kind of talking about, whether it's a micropile that's used to support that structure. And it might look something like that. Or whether it was a hybrid that used a timber post and had some kind of union at the ground. This union needs to be strong enough to encapsulate and protect the wood and reinforce its connection to the helical anchor. This is an example. These are not encapsulated currently, but this would have some kind of encapsulation detail here. That would have a little bit more of a bigger footprint on the marsh itself. We showed them these ideas as well. And this is a chart. I'll talk about that in a minute. So those were kind of just the discussion points with that group. One of the concerns, I guess, we just wanted to hear from them what they thought about this approach and strategy. They said, really it was essential that we maintain the 1-to-1, and that in the DMF's instance, I guess they said the 1.5-to-1 was sort of their goal, but they understood if projects, weren't always able to make that, and they were really interested in how minimal the impact in the marsh could be. Is that fair, Kathy, to maybe let you or Kelly add to some of those comments or thoughts?
The only thing that they really emphasized, that what I got out of it was, taking a look at the temporary construction impacts as well as the permanent construction impacts, and that maybe going with something like the helicals at a lower height, knowing that you can't go too high with the helicals, might be more amenable for some than having something that has more permanent impacts or more construction impacts like pilings or something along those lines. I don't know if Kelly had something.
Yeah, I think that was kind of the takeaway for me as well, and really emphasizing that their 1.5-to-1 was focused on the spartina grasses rather than the slightly more upland vegetation. So really focusing on trying to keep it in there.
I can't hear the conversation. Is it?
Is the mic.
It's right there, yeah.
Their recommendation for the 1.5-to-1 was based more on the spartina grasses, so there's a little more flexibility on that when it's over the high tide bush and just trying to really focus on having it over that area rather than over the more
Okay.
grass areas. But yeah, certainly on the construction related.
Okay. So that's actually beneficial then from when we were out there pulling things more into the brush. That would make DEP happier.
Yeah, they just want to avoid going over the marsh grasses.
Right, and I actually prefer that was pulled in more either because then it wouldn't be as exposed.
Right, we asked them, I think Kelly might have asked them, or I asked them point blank and just said, if you had a preference, which orientation would you prefer, or which alignment? And they said they'd prefer us to stay away from the Spartina and stick to the, as Kelly's saying, the high tide bush, which is that deciduous shrub that we spend a lot of time walking around in.
Right,
Not a
and
not a
that-
grass, yeah.
Right. And then Eric, because I like that, because if you go a little further up on the sheet, that would pull that further in and shield it. That would allow that to hinge down.
Yeah, we're still, as you can see, kind of working out how this sort of comes through
Yeah.
here. We've moved away from this western connection and we're now, connecting
Right.
on this interior piece.
Yeah, so I'm still not a big fan of that first look out there.
The first,
Yeah.
I love it.
And I think once we
love
get
it.
input from the neighborhood, it might not be so favorable either.
Yeah.
Because
think that one's-
this is still happening in the back. You can't really invite the neighborhood. There was a lot of input from the neighborhood on the East Bank previously,
not the other side.
not the other side now. They're not aware of this, so. And we've gone out of our way to
Yeah,
accommodate.
well, it also reinforces the importance we talked about last time about the building materials and how it's gonna look. So that if there is concerns, we're gonna try to have something that blends and not overpowers.
I agree,
scenery.
and that's why I think it's key that it sounds like I'm very happy here. DEP is favorable, it's going into the bush
Yeah, yeah, as
versus
opposed to the
staying,
grass.
so that'll help hide it. And then also, if you use the vertical ones, don't look at, but if you use that, if you get another picture, Eric, that showed them battered with the cross bracing, that would be,
Oh, right, yeah, this,
yeah, the images you have don't, no, those, none of those show, those are all plumb, right there, you actually have the helical piles battered. And I've seen other designs that can make the structure like, I don't have an image with me, but basically the pier cap is set into the stringers. So it makes a much lighter structure. So that pier cap would be up high, yes. So either the stringers would be set down flush with the bottom of it, or the pier cap would be brought up.
would
You
be
can still get
higher.
your clearance, but it makes a lighter structure. And then like David was saying, we look at the cable, using the cable, we can make it a lot lighter structure. So it's not as, it doesn't stand out as much.
Yeah, DMF expressed a preference for the cable as well.
Oh, did
Okay.
they?
Yeah, they thought they'd get some extra light.
Which is true.
We talked about the cable, then also maybe doing vertical as well, like that,
Mm,
which would offer.
I like that too.
Right, we were trying to represent that we're still going through a process and that, these things are being looked at in greater detail. But we did talk about both the picket and the cable, in addition to the horizontal.
And I want to remind everybody that part of this is going to be dictated by supply chain and the availability of the materials that we want to use. So that may be a dictation versus our preference in some cases. And,
So-
and you've expressed that to conservation and to others that we're looking for some flexibility with materials, I'm assuming. Is that correct, Eric?
We are, and I can continue on that thread, but all along, we've been saying we need to be flexible in terms of just budget and overall project approach. In keeping in mind, we've got a couple of different systems. We actually have a little bridge over the tidal inlet. We have this boardwalk system. We have the kayak launch. It'd be most efficient to try to make, if we can, the structural systems very similar, if not the same, for all those, just to simplify the construction process. And try to pick the one with the best economics around it and sort of least environmental impacts and best constructability as well, given the conditions. They did ask us a little bit about when the work would be performed, and kind of getting our heads around, you know, time of year restrictions maybe. Certainly ideally, you know, you're not out in the salt marsh, you know, in the growing season. However, there are, with any of these systems, there's frost concerns in terms of when these things can be installed and frost action on the anchors. So just layers of things that we're working through in terms of making, you know, recommendations on the framing system.
Okay.
The structural supports. Jim, I know you'd asked me some questions about hot dip galvanizing and just the life of the helical anchors. We've been working with a couple folks on that. And, you know, the approach we're going to recommend with the helical anchor is a thickened wall so that there's more metal on these tubes, you know, that support. They're going to have a heavier or a thicker wall. And they're going to have almost a 4 mil galvanizing coating, which this chart might be a little small, but it shows the forecasting of the life expectancy. We're kind of looking in here and saying, you know, okay, we'll kind of factor these down a little bit. We might be looking at a 60-year life, you know, with close to 4 mils, the thickened wall, and something in here in terms of its lifespan. And this is just another chart looking again, kind of more specifically at that, and kind of just helping us dial in the 1/4 inch wall at least 3.9 mils for the galvanizing. One thing we didn't talk about, but we've been in sort of sidebar conversations, are alternative systems to the micropiles, which would be a composite pile, which would look something like this. We did not talk with the agencies about these yet. We're still kind of fleshing out some of these composites. This would be an FRP or fiber reinforced plastic composite piling. It would be very strong. The challenge is it's more conventional. It's got a bigger footprint, and it's a driven pile, not a helical anchor. Advantages might be that you might be able to increase the span slightly between them, so you might have less of these in the marsh than you would with other systems. Here's an example of what that looks like. This one was put in the water. Working with this manufacturer to learn a little bit more about how low impact approach could be tailored to their product, to see how competitive this would be in this environmental impact perspective.
Couple questions.
Go ahead, David.
Which of these designs do you think is the most stable in terms of avoiding a catastrophic failure, such as a lifting from an ice storm or like we had over at Grays Beach on a couple of occasions? And which one is the most desired by the Conservation Commission? Because we got to please them.
Yeah, the good questions. I'm not sure if I'm ready to say. We're working on this kind of matrix. This is just the beginning of it, which is going to help us all work through the decision-making process. There are different advantages and pros and cons to each of these systems. And the more we're getting into the specifics, the more we're learning about sort of the trade-offs in terms of life expectancy, constructability, impacts in the marsh. To answer your question about catastrophic events, I think, you know, any of the systems might be left standing, whether it's the helical anchors or piling like this design, and you might see the superstructure be damaged, you know, in a catastrophic event that's got massive ice flows or debris in the water, that these would remain, and you might see damage to the superstructure above. But those kind of questions are a little more suited for our structural engineers, and we can have them join, you know, if we're ready at the next meeting, we'd have them join if you'd like to talk with them more about sort of how to go through the analysis of which system is best. These are interesting because the system has been around since like the late 90s. So, you know, maybe 25 years of experience with them. And they're showing really not much sign of degradation or aging. They do have a bigger footprint, but if their lifespan is significantly longer, they may last and sort of minimize future impacts to the marsh, because there would be no need for replacement, no need for work down in here to repair them if they are borne out to be as durable as people are thinking.
Okay.
Eric, could those be set, would you use vibratory equipment or would you set it with a pile driver?
Yeah, so it's a good question. We're working on that. We think it would be a rubber tracked excavator with a essentially a pile driving head, affixed to it. That would be on mats in this scenario out on the marsh in order to get these in. This is fairly clean looking and appealing in that regard. And if you took, every time you have a conventional bent with the helical anchors, and you're going to have the brace. If we look at that kind of example, you've got these 3 contact points. You've got people walking around, and making these connections and so on. Every time you've got one of these now, we really think we need to kind of be going both ways too. I know earlier I'd said one way was adequate. But this is kind of related to the installation, is that they're thinking that alternating is maybe a better scenario. So you add up all those impacts on the ground and on the marsh, or you sort of add the impact of a single, footprint, and maybe they're comparable depending on the diameter. That's something we're looking at more closely.
Yeah, I think, Eric, you'd have to like draw up something like, this is what has or it's visually more there, but if you need fewer room because you can get greater span lengths between the structure, that might be preferable. Than helical piles if you need a lot more. I think once you have a better idea what the design would look, if we could get a more accurate representation of, what we could think we could get for span lengths versus the helicals, so we can kind of do apples and apples.
Understood. Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think there's also a very clean approach to this, which is an integral pile cap and framing with this kind of design, which would thin out this profile, tremendously. You just have to, there's a budget piece we have to look at as well.
Right. Now, the thing is, though, here's a curiosity, with the single pile we'd probably have less jacking issues if you had ice with the single pile. What is your opinion on with the helical, because you do have the batter? Is that could be more of an issue, or?
I'll have to bring Chris Jones with me, Rich, to the next meeting and have him. He's our structural lead on this, and he could talk to you more about, the pros and cons of each. I think it's just kind of more edges here, more things to get maybe hung up on as material and tides move through.
Right.
Versus maybe a simplified or more streamlined approach.
Right. Well, if you have a single pile like the monopile, you'll less likely with tides, if you have the ice around it, you won't get a jacking. It won't jack the pile out of the ground, basically.
Right. It resists maybe that movement a little bit more.
Right. To accommodate.
One of the things that we're getting more details on, but our initial hope had been that this construction could be done with the equipment. I'll try to draw on this, but the equipment staged on pieces of the boardwalk that were already built. And
I've seen that done.
Right, the rig essentially drilling and installing these ones, working off of a piece that it's already constructed with.
Whereas you would have the crane mats for the piles. But the thing is, though, is because we're going through the brush area, they've already been out there. It was a similar equipment when we were doing the borings. So it'd be similar impacts. You could just have requirements that they have to use a high flotation track. So they have low ground pressure.
Is it bigger equipment though, or is it same size?
It's bigger equipment, but the size of the equipment doesn't really impact the amount of disturbance. It's ground pressure. So the bigger the track, you could have a little small rubber track excavator that would have the equivalent ground pressure of a much larger machine. It's basically how big the track is. You think like a snowcat or something like that. And then also that's what you use crane mats also you place down. So it doesn't tear up the surrounding ground. We did similar, like did a path down in, was it Marion? We went out to the salt marsh and we installed actually steel pipe piles.
Yeah, what we're seeing is because of the height of these above grade, in order for the equipment to be on the decking and screw the anchors in, there's a lot of torsional stress on that equipment, meaning it wants to twist when it's drilling these in on the deck. And so that twisting motion, wanting to kind of rotate as it sits up here, is causing some stresses on the design of the boardwalk that have to be factored in if the plan is to drill from up
Right,
above.
before we use it.
Yeah, because Eric, well, I've seen them use like what you're showing here. When you start going above like 30 inches or so, it's for like the low profile decks, it's great. But like you said, when you get something higher than this, you have to over design the structure in order to handle the installation.
Right, so at the heights we're at, this is getting more involved. And so in all likelihood, even with a micropile in this application, the equipment would be on the marsh. So to your point about low ground pressure, high flotation mats, probably is the way any of the systems are going to be approached, just because of the transfer of the costs into the boardwalk structure at these heights.
Right, and most of that's considered it's a temporary impact anyway.
Okay, next. Where
So
are
we
we?
touched on the questions on the galvanizing. We touched on some of the systems we're continuing to look at and the beginnings of this matrix. We're going to continue to kind of refine this to help sort of guide the decision-making process as we move towards a recommendation.
Eric, can you, the third from the bottom, that actually has the inner goal here, it looks like. The third picture down on the right. It looks like the pier's built in. That actually, can you zoom in on that?
Sure. Let me just get it over
There, that has a much lighter feel to it.
It does.
And Kelly, you were saying that the commission prefers the,
Yeah, they do like the composite pilings.
Okay.
Just from a.
Aesthetically, it looks better too.
right, and if we could like get much greater spacing, Eric, with that, so on
Right.
top of it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with you. I think that, they also touched on leachates from the materials and, pressure treated timbers, or some other treatment, over time leaches down into the marsh. Maybe to some degree with the galvanizing, the zinc treatment as well. I don't think there's a lot of leachate from an FRP product. So again, probably another column for this matrix. As we work
I think it'd be zero basically.
Yeah. No, it's a nice system, and I think it's one that we're looking into in greater detail, especially some of the aesthetic benefits coupled with longevity, having to not go back on the marsh.
Right.
I think over time.
Right, and I think from potentially from a resiliency standpoint, it might be a more resilient system too.
Yeah, no, all the points you're making about flood and ice. Yes, absolutely.
Jim, I don't know if you saw, but Bud gave a chat there that he has to leave at 6 o'clock, so I don't know if he's not gone yet, or
Is there
if he
anything else
has
we
any
can
other
vote on?
things he wanted to add.
So let's.
Hold on.
No.
Nothing to,
Okay,
okay, but if you have to leave, you gotta leave. We still have a quorum, so that's okay. Are there any questions, Bud, before you go that you have that?
No, that was the only reason I mentioned it. If we needed a vote on the minutes or something, and you needed me, I didn't want to desert you.
I don't think I have minutes. Do I have minutes?
You have minutes.
So Eric, if you would give us a moment to quickly jump out of our presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me do that.
Oh, Eric, you could stick around. I mean, just,
No, I'm not going anywhere. I just thought I'd let you look at each other and you can go through it.
I don't want to look at them. They don't want to look at me either.
Move we approve the minutes of the last meeting?
I have a motion to accept the minutes of the last meeting from David. Do I have a second?
second,
I have a second from somebody. I'm not sure who.
Susan,
What?
Susan, okay. Any discussion? Okay, roll call. Bud,
Approve.
David,
Yes,
Susan,
Yes,
Rich,
Abstain?
Jim, yes. And Steve is not here, so that would be that. Okay, great. Thank you for that part. And Bud, if you need to leave, I think you can leave now.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry.
Well, thank you, Dave, Bud. Appreciate your time. Eric, are you still with us? All
I'm here.
right, so let's talk about this bridge and let's try to wrap this meeting up a little
is
bit.
Eric looking for feedback from us on which one of the designs we prefer, or is that still, are they still investigating which is available?
it's
Yeah, I'm
still
just
under,
trying to brief you so you're seeing what we're looking at. You're hearing
Okay.
about the systems. I think someone had asked me what was happening in other places. I know Sandwich is looking at the micropile or the helical anchor with a wooden post on the top. I don't know if that's where they've landed, but a version of this is what I understand is under consideration there. They have maybe a more historic kind of overlay on their project than we do.
Yeah, they're trying to make sure they kind of emulate the existing one as best they can.
Right. Understood.
Right, because Eric, that one you show with the cross members, when you have storm events, you get logs and other stuff going through there. I think that'd be very susceptible to damage. And from a maintenance standpoint, I don't think it'd be beneficial in the long run.
With the
for it.
heavier timber.
I mean, it looks more traditional, but the thing is, I think it's gonna be a maintenance nightmare in the long run.
I
Okay,
kind of like the look of that monopile one, if that works.
Agreed, Dave, agreed.
yeah,
Yes, especially the one, Eric, that has the, where the pier, it's set into the structure. Like in
Yeah.
those,
Like
Yeah,
that one.
the integral cap would be
Yeah.
very, very clean looking,
yeah.
aesthetic.
cool.
It would definitely let a lot of light, it would let a lot of light in too, probably, so if we had fewer of them.
What's the diameter of those, Eric?
Yeah, they look substantial.
12 feet.
Yeah, we're looking, I think at least 12 probably. They're gonna be a little bit different than a wood pile that's gonna vary. They're gonna be all the same. My sense of it, so not to get too off sort of the track of sort of constructability, but just to kind of reference, technically, it can be fairly challenging to make all of these points align in the field without some sort of adapter plate or welding or field fabrication. And while you want these to be all kind of uniform and level, we want the system to be very uniform. There'll be some field work here that means modification and galvanizing in the field, and that finish is never quite as perfect as when it comes from a factory. So whether that adjustment is down at the mud line or that adjustment is up at the top, there is a process, because not all of these drive in perfectly at 10 degrees on either side and 45 on the brace. So there is an alignment or a reconciliation that has to happen. And so the simpler system has less need for that. And I
Right.
think the monopile, you might realize is very straightforward, and less people walking around in the marsh, less custom field finishing in the marsh. Just other layers to this that we're still looking at that make it appealing.
Right. And I think the other thing, Eric, is with the helical, it's not showing, is you're gonna need inline bracing that goes longitudinal with the structure too.
Yeah, I don't know if we felt that was continuous. You're talking about a brace like this way, but in
No,
certain
on
cases-
on the helical piles, in order to stabilize it, you're probably gonna need diagonals that go down longitude or in line with the structure.
Understood. Yes, that should be drawn on that one. Yeah, I don't think it's everyone, but yes, there does need to be that stiffening.
So there's gonna be more there. It starts getting cluttered.
looks like an erector set.
Like I said, it's a very good system when it's low, but when you start getting higher and higher, it gets busy.
Lonely.
Right. No, it's
Okay.
those are all good points. So and then just kind of this boardwalk system, the approach here was going to translate into we have to deal with crossing as the boardwalk comes back around. We mentioned this in the agency review. We'd like to span this inlet entirely. And so it ends up being like a small bridge. And so there's different loading on the support system and the piles for that. And so ideally we can make all of these the same system. A little bit heavier pile would work better for a bridge.
So how big are we talking? Because now that if we actually end up doing the pile, we have a larger span, maybe that issue goes away.
Right. Well, that's one of the advantages. If you pick a system like that, everything could be the same, without elaborate doubling or bracing. Potentially the larger diameter pile, maybe a 40 or 45-foot span is what we're looking at here. We want to go from the high side on either side, and stay out of this area below the high tide line, just barely above it on either side line of the inlet. This is an example of a footbridge that I looked at. This is a FRP bridge that's assembled or bolted together in the field. Somebody had asked me about a metal bridge or a wood bridge. I mean, those would be options. I think getting it there become complicated. A metal bridge would have corrosion issues. Wood would be very heavy kind of structurally. It's too far in to really get a barge to this location. So we'd be dealing with like terrestrial equipment, and how do you get that kind of structure out there to then swing it into place?
I mean, if you can use the same type of techniques, Eric, I would suggest looking at, if you want longer spans, look at glue lambs.
I'm sorry, what did you say,
A
Rich?
glue lamp
What is that?
or laminated lumber.
Oh.
You get longer spans, look at glue lambs, or if you needed to, even look at some galvanized structural steel elements through there. You maybe on the interior, you can face them with wood, so you have that aesthetic, but you get a longer span out of it.
Yeah, so the glue lamb is glue laminated timbers, and so a lot of times, that you've seen bridges that look like this. That's an arch, out of timber, and so the strength of that is built out of the way the pieces are put together.
But I don't mean an arch though, Eric. I'm just being like, for the stringers, so you can span a longer distance.
Yeah, I think they just get thick pretty fast.
Yes.
In terms of how deep they are, but getting it there when you're talking about that length of, and you're just looking at the impacts, right?
But you could laminate it. You could laminate like a flitch plate or something like that, and use some kind of structural element in there, like a C channel, where it's bolted in. And I mean, there's different techniques.
So what Rich is talking about is a piece of steel that's in between the pieces of lumber that are glued together. The steel makes it stronger and can span greater distances. I think, if you're getting to that kind of system, you have a crane, a larger piece of equipment out here. And I think it's hard to get a fully assembled 45-foot bridge to the site.
Oh, right. No, what I'm saying is you could assemble it as long as we had the beams.
Yeah,
basically,
right.
You launch it from the shore. You set up some A-frames, and you basically just push it out from the shore onto those pile support structures.
Right. So you could come across from this side,
Right.
push it over.
Right. So the beams become your stringers, and then basically you just do the decking and everything like they're going to build for the rest of the boardwalk, where you have your carpenters out there assembling it, in field. So at least it'll look fairly uniform.
Right.
That's-
Right. In wood, correct. So we've looked at this area. We've all walked this and stood here at different times of the tide, and so we're just beginning to kind of look at the framing system, support system for the boardwalk, and then what options we might have for bridges. And so, like I said, this was a built-up one on site. We'll look at some of those other options, like a wood version, and see what that might look like.
All right, good. And I see you've got some information about the kayak. You just give us some different looking launch options as far as that's what these pictures are.
Correct. Kathy, remind me, when did Carl jump on our call? Was that with the police? I think he joined us.
No, he was at our last
We were
meeting.
here, last meeting.
Was it at the last meeting? Okay, so at that meeting, he said, he said, this is okay. He said, but I've seen some other ones that are a little nicer and a little more user friendly. And I don't know if we had much sort of input. This was kind of a carryover from the first designs. This is the site he directed us to, which is just a little more sort of modular and flexible. I really like this kind of tapered one where there's lots of ways to launch off of it. rather than something with this hard edge and decking, and kind of one launching point. He was recommending something along these lines.
You know what's nice about that one at the top corner is multiple people could use it at the same time, so you're not like waiting for somebody.
Right.
Yeah, and I think as we get into this design a little bit more, you look at, you know, if there was a rental here, could they stage a couple of kayaks, you know, on the float itself? So they're able to get them in without passage over the ramp and so on. So this was his recommendation, and I think they're nice. We're going to follow up with these folks.
Kelly, does the width of the float matter? I mean, would the Concom have?
Well, we have a square footage requirement, maximum, but, that's 200 square feet. So I'm assuming you're not gonna, would be proposing to go beyond that.
Okay.
For communal docks, they do allow higher numbers, so. Yeah, there's not really I think, they try to limit it to 300 square foot for like a residential communal type structure, but obviously if this is a larger public project.
So you think that they would allow something in that, like the upper right?
I think part of it, it's kind of hard with the setting, like how is that?
Are you accessing it?
Yeah, how are you accessing that? Would that be at the end of a pier?
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think there'd be a gangway, you know, down from the pier, you know, to it from a higher elevation.
So Eric, would there be a trail that came out to it and you'd have the dock, or we basically almost have to do like a boardwalk structure with the piles that went out and then you'd have a ramp coming down to it?
Yeah, I think that's.
Oh, okay.
All right.
So, you know, we'll continue to look at this a little bit more. We need to do some more field work to get some bathymetry to be able to, they were careful to talk about the clearances. And I know actually the town has more restrictive requirements in terms of low tide clearances when the float is there, distance to the mud line. So we need more data. We'll be out in the field to get that.
Yeah, I can imagine with the town that a lot of that is because of the use with boats using it. If this is really going to be for kayak use, then they may
Good point.
go more towards the 2.5 feet rather than the 3 feet of water depth. So
Oh, because it's not.
yeah,
Nope.
it's not most boats, yeah, and you know, looking at the property.
Okay. What else we got?
I think that's it. Brings us to the end, which we all know, which was, you know, we're taking a little more time as we're going through the schedule here. We're now at the end of January, and we were really, you know, looking to have a set produced, like a 30% level, you know, somewhere kind of in the middle of the month of January. So this is all kind of moving out into February at this point, as far as wrapping up a 30% package with construction costs, making some of the decisions on structures. You've helped us a lot tonight with the restroom discussion, the driveway discussion. So that's all good. I think big picture, what we're looking at is trying to move towards permitting, initiating that process in April. And so, you know, we really don't want to let this go much longer than, you know, into the month of February. To try to finish up this so we can then move forward with the permitting and efforts.
Okay.
Oh,
And
interesting.
a lot of this is related to what Kathy mentioned about some of the code changes at the end of the year and trying to make sure we've got these permits filed with some time there.
Anybody got any questions regarding the timeline? We're getting there.
We're making progress, for sure.
Good. Okay, is that the presentation by Eric? And where'd everybody go?
Yes, that's what I have for tonight.
How'd I disappear?
We can see you,
We can
Jim.
see you.
I can't see anybody.
You're not really there.
We can see you, so be careful.
All right, so Eric, do you have anything else or are you all set?
I don't have anything else for tonight. I think, you know, in an ideal world, I think we should look out another 2 weeks and be back to you with, if you're able to do that timeline and be back with more discussion on the pilings, so we can move through, and the bridge and move through that process.
Okay.
It's 2 weeks from tonight, Eric.
I think,
14th, February 14th, Valentine's Day.
mm,
No,
might not be fun,
I think it is.
That's probably not that good.
Huh?
That's probably not a good.
but that's the Monday, the 14th, right?
Oh, Pisha, your wife won't mind. It's Valentine's Day.
What if we move it up in time a little bit, so if someone does want to go for Valentine's dinner, it wouldn't interfere? Keep the day, but move the time up a little earlier, would that work?
I have that horrible thing called work.
Oh, that's so boring,
I
Nick.
know, I'm sorry, but
You have to work, huh?
I gotta work.
Because the following Monday is a holiday. So it's not
Yeah,
even
that-
like, so we need to start making, I think the sooner the better, so.
Right. So if it's not gonna be Monday, the 14th, what about Tuesday, the 15th?
Works for me.
It with me.
What? 4:30?
At 4:30, is that possible for you, Eric?
It is, yes.
Okay, so just this one time, so that you'll see him Valentine's Day.
I mean, if it's the committee's sort of preference to go on the 14th, it's a little after 6 now, we could
Yeah,
carry it
let's
on the 14th if it works for everyone else.
Let's do the 15th in case anybody needs to go home and get dolled up. We'll cut them some slack. So the
Oh.
15th, good with everybody?
Only just
We're
this
always
one,
dolled up, look at us.
just
Gorgeous.
this one thing, just this one time.
Just
Tuesday,
this one time.
Yep.
Okay.
When we're not on the course.
So we got that done and we got the meetings. So the next thing I asked Kathy to put on our agenda is the discussion about naming.
Let Eric go? Can we let Eric go?
Yeah.
This doesn't impact him. I just want him to know. We're just gonna talk about.
We're just gonna talk about you, Eric, so don't worry about it.
Okay. No, it's no problem. Would you like me to stay, or is it really not
We're
involved?
just gonna talk about the naming of the building, of the park. That's the only other item we've got on our agenda.
Sure, I'd like to listen to that. I'll stay on.
Sure.
Oh, and Eric, if you do end up leaving, just one thing, when you do show the monopile with it, could you show the railings instead of vertical? Could you show them splayed out? So it'll match the other one?
Well, yeah, we'll work on that a little bit coming up this week.
Similar, yeah, with the other ones, thank you.
Cool. All right, so I asked Kathy to put this on the agenda. It's something we keep talking about, but we haven't done anything about. And I'll be honest with you, this is coming from me personally. Over the last couple of months, I have unfortunately experienced a lot of people passing away. One in particular, you may or may not know, is my brother Bob, who played a big part in this community for a number of years. And actually, he spearheaded the purchase of this whole site to begin with in 1985, and here we are. But it became obvious to me that the town doesn't have a memorial park. And we continually name things because we don't have a memorial park. We name, actually, the bike path bridge is named after somebody, I don't even know who the person is. The Georgia Lair Bridge over the river, Peter Homer Park, et cetera, et cetera. But we're running out of places to name, to memorialize people. And I thought that maybe I'm going to throw this out and just for some general discussion. Kathy has been calling this, if you all have noticed lately, she's been referring to this as the Riverwalk Park. And what I'd like to propose is that we present to the selectmen that we call this the Riverwalk Memorial Park. And it'll give us an opportunity. One of the things we want to do is be able to sell the boards on this boardwalk. And that's a good place to memorialize people, which they're doing on the Bass Hole Boardwalk. And maybe there's an area on the grounds that we can create a place to memorialize, citizens who have either town employees or, past selectmen or somebody who's done something spectacular for our community. We run out of schools and other things to name people after them. So I just want to put this out as kind of food for thought, that maybe the idea of making this a memorial park versus just a Riverwalk Boardwalk park, giving us the community an opportunity to have a place to memorialize people in our future. I just want to put that out to the committee to think about, and I'm not looking for a vote now, but I think we really need to start thinking about what we're going to do with the name of this and not call it the drive-in site forever. So,
No, I think that's a neat idea, Jim. My only question is, if I can see this coming up, what's the history with the original name and how did that come out? Is it called, what's it, Crow's Pasture or what?
Oh, yeah.
So what's the history with that? Because if that comes up,
I
why
gotta be
was it
honest with
named
you.
that and where'd that come from?
So, it's kind of like one of life's mysteries to me. The selectmen are the ones who name things. So when we had Bass River Beach and Smuggler's Beach, I went to them and said, pick one, but you have the ability to name things. But I'm not sure they've always named things. So like the property that's across from, I'm going to date myself here, the old Acme Laundry, where we've now created 3 little pocket parks.
Yep.
I don't name those and the significance of naming any of those. I don't know if there's I'm not aware of any process that the town has. Somebody said, hey, we should name this park after Peter Homer. And it was done. Somebody said, hey, George Allaire's done a lot to get this bike path done. Let's name the bridge over the river after the George Allaire, and it was done. So what the process is, I don't know.
Right. Well, I just want to know what the significance of it was before. I like your idea for the Riverwalk Memorial Park. I think that's a really good idea. But there's somebody asked, well, it already was named
It already
after
has been
somebody.
named, yeah.
So it might be good to know the backstory of it. Yeah, just so we're aware of it if it comes up. I don't know if there is one.
Why don't I reach out to the town historian, and
Sure.
he can maybe enlighten us a little bit as to whether there's some historic significance to any of these names and how things get named. And then maybe if we know there's a process that we need to do, then we start with that. I know we had talked about in the past, maybe have a contest to name it. But either way, we've got to put a name to this thing. We've been dealing with since what, 2015, I think I noted somewhere as a committee, and we still call it the drive-in site. So I just want to put a little thought in everybody's heads to think about it. I will reach out to, oh my gosh, his name just went out of my head.
Hey, Jim, though, is an homage to the drive-in site, though. So if it's the Parker River Memorial Riverwalk, I think the sign should be tasteful, but it should be in neon. I knew you'd like that.
Well, that's all about having an attractive entrance to the site, and I'm not sure neon would do that, but I think I just, just as I've been thinking, and over the last couple of weeks, we're losing people. It's like we really don't have a place in town to memorialize people. We have a few spots that we've picked for special individuals, but I think of some, past selectmen over the last 30 years that have, Jerry Sullivan comes to mind. Joel Wolfson, who basically gave us Flax Pond. These are types of people that, the town, you name a school after, but,
I think it's a good idea because it goes along with the idea of selling the boardwalk planks too. It kind of ties it together, and maybe you'd have like a great adventure or something. There could be opportunities.
and I like the idea what Kathy's been calling it Riverwalk,
Riverwalk.
because it ties around, because really what we're doing is the walk along the river and the boardwalk. So Riverwalk seems to make sense to me.
Yeah.
And Memorial Park, Riverwalk Memorial Park, all kind of flows to me, but something for us to talk about a little bit. I will do some homework and find out from, oh my gosh, I can see him in my face and I can't think of his name. He knows everything about the town.
Bob Kelly,
George?
Bob Lawton.
No, he hung around with Jack Bregington Smith all the time. He's at the Historic Society. Duncan Oliver. Duncan
Oh,
Oliver
Doug Oliver, okay.
knows
Oh, good,
everything.
good. Pull that out.
So I'll reach out to Duncan and ask him if, he has any knowledge of any, significant naming of it as well. But ultimately, I think what we will have to probably do is make a decision ourselves and then go to the selectmen and say, we need you to do this. Because they're the ones ultimately who get to name things.
They do have a naming policy for town properties.
Oh, they do?
Yeah, they do. It kind of just says what you say, the board of selectmen shall retain the authority to name town land and or buildings. You can nominate land or buildings by a citizen or a committee or department or other organization. So there's a process here. I can send it out to everyone. It's also old, of 2008. But I think you're right. I mean, if this is something, whether you want to if the DISAC wants to make a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, they can certainly do that. I don't know whether there's like any structures or whatever that, there's other naming rights with regard to a structure, and maybe it's a money generating endeavor to get, some company's name on restroom. I don't know.
Actually,
Not a lot of story, but
you're onto something there. If you think about Flax Pond and how they did a public-private process to build the facilities over there, maybe we get to the idea of a public-private process to build any gazebo or bandstand or whatever we want to do at the event area. And that's an opportunity for public-private options as well. So, I mean, we've got some things we can look at as far as public and private. I'm not sure whether Flax Pond is a good example, but we could certainly talk to some of the people that did that about public-private.
Like Russo Lodge, isn't that they call the main building there?
I think it's a loop, yeah. And I know they did it, they created a probably a 501 of some sort. I know they raised funds for that for a couple of years. I can talk to Pat Armstrong. She could probably enlighten me a little bit. I think she had something to do with that. But that's an opportunity for us to look at, the event space as part of a public-private process to develop a bandstand of some sort.
now, Eric, with regard to the floodplain and a bandstand, a permanent one, I mean, a temporary one is not an issue, but a permanent one, would that need to be elevated in any way, or?
It's not living space.
Yeah, if it's a
Right,
fixed,
it could
it'd
just
have to
flow
be-
through.
Be a structure, right?
yeah, it'd be up
I
on
mean-
pylons.
Jim makes a good point. I mean, I think the park's interesting. It has very unique and distinct spaces and features. And, when somebody's selling bricks or planks, you get a lot of participation maybe, but if you have unique spaces that are only a handful, maybe you can get some real sponsorship or naming opportunities. Like there are 3 overlooks, we think. There's a bridge. There's the restrooms, there's an event space, right? Whether there's a stage or not, it's the event space at the Riverwalk Memorial Park. There also are those little rooms, I call them rooms, there's those little green spaces between the parking and the river. I think there's lots of opportunity to maybe follow through with this idea and see what kind of potential there is if you want to name or attract sponsorship for some certain areas.
So some food for us to think about over the next couple of weeks. I'll visit with Duncan Oliver with regards to naming, and I will touch base with Pat Armstrong and find out how they did that, whether that's something that can be transferred over to another entity, or we'd have to create a new entity. I don't know. I think these are some of the things that, we're making progress, obviously, under the construction, but there are other things that we also need to keep in mind, and things like naming it and public-private partnerships, stuff we should be looking at as well. Kind of chewing bubble gum while we're walking down the road, but they need to be taken simultaneously, I would think. Okay. Anything else to add? Hearing none, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I have a motion from David. Do I have a second?
Second,
Second from Rich. Let's see, I'm supposed to do a roll call, right? David, aye.
Aye.
Susan,
I,
Rich?
aye.
All right, and I'm an aye, and I'm assuming Bud would have already said aye, but he's already left us. So the 15th is our next meeting, and I will get some research done about the naming issue and public-private issues and bring that back to you then, and we're going to have Eric give us some updates of where he's at. Okay?
All right, excellent.
Thank you all very much. Have a great night, and we'll see you. in a
Thank you.
couple weeks. All right, bye.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.